So the focus of this session today is driving customer engagement with hyper-personalization automation. I think before we get going, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves. Maybe if Deepak, you could start for us.
Sure. Hi, I'm Deepak. I'm VP of e-commerce at McAfee. And so we drive, help people secure their digital lives beyond just traditional antivirus to also identity and privacy protection, and manage all our e-commerce business globally.
Hi there, Adam Bell at Customers Bank, the Chief Marketing Officer. Customers Bank is a $22 billion bank, very much in the traditional sense, but also a very strong digital footprint as well, very relevant for the conversation today.
My name is Ryan. I'm Director of Product at Misfits Market. Misfits Market is a grocery platform, subscription platform that aims to offer affordable groceries by enabling and taking advantage of supply chain inefficiencies. I oversee our B2B product lines, our payments and checkout experience, and our enterprise systems. That includes our MarTech stack.
Hi, Patrick Dalessandro. I'm evidently a digital thought leader. I'm also most recently head of digital marketing and digital platforms at KeyBank, one of the super regional banks with a footprint in about 23 states. We most recently transformed our digital marketing footprint with a large and significant marketing platform change that is super relevant to the conversations we are having right now, because we were in the midst of knocking down both data silos and operational silos from a human capital perspective.
And I'll be your moderator today. My name is Zachary Konopka. I'm with an organization called Kaleyra. And so we are one of the largest aggregators across the globe in terms of mobile messaging, your SMS, MMS, WhatsApp, those sort of things. We work with MoEngage already. It's a great partner of ours, so I was really excited to be a part of this discussion. Okay, so I think to kick things off, I think everyone would kind of like to understand, we've all sort of been on the receiving ends of brands trying to hyper-personalize experiences for us. I'd like to start with each one of our panelists in terms of what your experience has been, what that means for you and your team, and how you go about sort of prioritization for your consumers.
Sure. Do you want me to kick it off?
Sure.
So, as we've been on this personalization journey for now like almost 3+ years, and the way we approach it, what does it mean with like our brand, like, and our mission, right? If as our goal is to help empower customers to live their digital lives freely, and that means how do we protect them, whether they're on their desktop, their web, their mobile phones. And we started to look at that and say, okay, what are their customer needs? And then how can we personalize those experiences? We use those kind of principles to help build personalization experiences, whether they're coming to our website to buy a product, how do we help them personalize and choose the product? Because sometimes it's difficult, like which product should I buy? Do I need VPN? Do I need to protect my family? And then not just end at acquisition, but really think about engagement and retention, and how do we personalize those journeys, right, depending on the products they've purchased, what kind of segments they're in. And so we invested a lot more in then building the personalization engine or stack to help support, whether it's bringing in data from all the different places into a data lake and into a CDP, and then personalizing by using segment building on top of it, and then building personalized customer journeys. So I would still say we are like kind of personalizing this experience. We're kind of in like maybe like a 5 out of 10 of where we want to be, and that's why there's so much more opportunity for us in how, as brands, we personalize the experience for our customers.
Oh, good. And I think when you talk about experience, we're here because of customer experience, right? We're here because we want to try to get to hyper-personalization. And that is not easy. That is why we're here, right? If anybody tells you that it's just an easy step, I think they'd be highly mistaken for a lot of reasons. One is, how do you look at the data, right? How do you understand the story, like that the customers are going through, and how do you catch them at the moment that it is relevant for them? I almost use a model that I call better, for lack of a better term. But it's build, which is the B, right? Build, try to understand the data, understand the campaign, understand the audience, empathy. It's trying to understand and build the trust with the audience and know that you're going to be delivering the right message to them because you've looked at the data of who they are and what value you can bring to them. Almost like a Disney story, right? How does a Disney story start? Tragedy, you build the empathy because you see what they're going through, and then you start to understand, boy, you could get out of this mess. You could get out of this situation. So in the same respect, it's having empathy in the data and trying to understand that. And trust, right? After you have that point, it's building trust. Then you can start to tailor that message around the trust. I'll forget what the other letters are, but certainly relevancy and trying to do more of that re-engagement at the back end will give you a better model.
Excuse me. I would say from my individual perspective and my team's perspectives, we try and incorporate very intentional thought. And from a product lens, we always try and anchor on user value, very specific use cases before investing into any type of technology. And one of those is enabling improved personalization through new engagement products and tools. And so we think about that through all of our product verticals, whether not just your conventional acquisition or engagement retention funnel experiences. So that's from a team and individual lens. From a brand perspective, I think when it comes to intentional personalization, we don't, at least from a lean growing startups perspective, where we have very, very finite resources and are very lean. I think that comes into play where we have to be intentional, where we focus our resources to first enable the investments into the platforms to enable hyper-personalization, but then also we are building our brand reputation with these customers, and so we want to be intentional of how we engage with them, and that kind of goes into the trust and safety topics that has been brought up on this panel already. And so I think, the theme here across our organization is just very thoughtful and intentional investments into what specifically to hyper-personalize and not personalize for the sake of personalization.
From my perspective, and to build on a little bit where Adam was going with his better model, the way we look at it, or the way we've approached it across the businesses that I've worked with and worked for, was assuming we've implemented the right technology. The next problem that you face is how do we organize and break down the silos, both from a data perspective and from a human resource perspective. And the way I look at it is the technology that you're replacing or the technology you're implementing, that does not create the silos. The people create the silos. And we talk about how. How are we going to hyper-personalize? Well, really it is how are we using the technology that we've just implemented to actually achieve hyper-personalization? And a lot of stuff has to happen in advance of, during, and directly after the implementation of technology. So when we think about the how, the technology will enable us to do that. But we have to start thinking about the who. Because what we end up doing when we implement this technology is we remove, in many aspects, the technical barriers that we previously had when we're talking about hyper-personalization. We're moving hands-on keyboards from developers and coders to marketers and lines of business. All of a sudden, we are moving those job functions from one point of the organization to the other, and we have to communicate across these silos. So as we're training against the really technical parts of how we use the new technology, we're also training and developing organizations within our business to think differently on how we engage. And as we move down that path and we start creating these hyper-personalized customer journeys that were once hypothetical use cases, then what we're doing is we're creating a collaborative workforce across technology, marketing, and lines of business that allow us to better understand our customers, drive value, and actually get to that hyper-personalization.
Yeah, I think that human capital theme is really relevant through everyone's answer here today. Our tools are only as good as their users, right? So how do you all go about, or how do you recommend an organization to align that data to those processes, or to enable or empower your people to create effective workflows for this? Anyone want to take initial stab at that?
Sure, I can get started. So I'll first start off by being vulnerable and saying we failed at this a couple of times, right? And I think one of the things we realize is that, and I suspect it'll resonate with this audience, that if you're in a mid-stage kind of to a large company, for companies to grow, they tend to break down the groups into smaller groups in marketing, product, engineering. And then those groups work on their own in different scrums to go faster, and then that starts to create those silos. And then what ends up happening is each ends up creating their own data warehouses, their own journeys, and personalizing those. Now take a step back and say, what happens to the customer? What they start to experience is a disjointed customer journey, right? One group decides to message more, the other group decides to personalize a web page differently, and the style systems also start to change. And so that was one of the things we experienced to kind of frame up the problem statement of like, yes, you have data, yes, you have people, yes, you have processes, but they're kind of working in a different. How did we solve this? I think one of the frameworks we used was to really look at a service design framework, right? And you put the customer at the center. That's the North Star. And then you understand their pain points. You have a lot of data points that come in from CSAT, from NPS. Start working backwards from what you want to solve for the customer. The second thing is what we found very efficient was like to bring the entire cross-functional team together for those service design workshops. Not just marketing or product, but bring in the data scientists, bring in the ML engineers. That's when we started to really kind of unlock, because one, they had a shared understanding of the problem space. They all saw, when you put all the journeys in a common, like a Figma, and you just show it digitally, like, oh, wow, this is what we built. Okay, how do we clean up and how do we improve? Then comes the technology question, right, which you all mentioned, which is like, okay, now we can say, let's put a common CDP. Let's unify all the data. Now let's go and build a common orchestration engine. The things that we found that was most efficient in terms of unifying was having common horizontal teams. So marketing could still be focused on acquisition and retention and engagement, because those are very unique, discrete stages of the journey. But what happens beneath is the need for like horizontal teams. So a horizontal design team which focuses on a common design system, common design patterns. A common MarTech team which focuses on building the customer engagement platform, like Ravi showed. Like you can leverage those experience platforms in a common way and build efficiencies out of it. That's what's, and I will still say like we're still like, halfway there. We're starting to see the impact of that, but there's a lot more unlock to happen in how we unify the data, people, processes together.
Yeah, and I'd say, you're hearing a lot of the train the brain here, right? Everybody wants to go into AI. How many people here are using AI right now? That's not bad. That's actually more than I thought there would be. Quite a bit more. How many people are in the stage of trying to learn and proof of concept, or just trying to get to that next stage? So a lot of the same hands are also there for AI as well. The whole point behind that, though, is you have to start to train the brain. You can't get to AI and just think, oh, we'll just set it and forget it. Sure, there is some functionality like that, but when it comes to designing a customer experience and a customer journey, it's really, truly a mapping exercise. And then after the mapping exercise, it is getting folks, like they're saying, getting all of the organization to align to that, to say this is really the map that we want to go after, and then this is how AI or machine learning can improve that process. So I always say it is about the process. It is about what you're trying to build first before you actually say that AI is the right tool for us.
Yeah, that's great. I think you really touched on our next question. Great. So we're looking at human capital, but what are some of those impactful tools or strategies that you all may be leveraging in terms of aligning customer data with hyper-personalization? You'd mentioned machine learning or CDP. Can you all talk about what your approach has looked like and sort of some of those tools that have supported effective personalization efforts? Maybe we start on this end.
Yeah, and I kind of want to stay, I do want to stay a little bit tool agnostic, and talk more about the who and the how. So when we're thinking about hyper-personalization, and we're thinking about targeting what use cases and what ultimate use cases and journeys we're going to attack first, I might be getting ahead of myself here, but we start thinking about it from a business intelligence perspective, right? And there are tools out there, many of them, that we use to actually inform what use cases we're going to start with and how we prioritize them. Of course, we're all using Python to yank the data out of the data lake and pull that into the business intelligence tools, but it's the individual business analysts that are using the business intelligence tools that are deriving the insights that allow us as leaders to make the decisions we need to make to choose the first use cases where the juice has this, where the juice is worth the squeeze, right? So that we can take these individual use cases using business intelligence, make the investment to build the journey so that when we're going to the executive leadership teams that we all have to support and explain why we're choosing the journeys and why we're making the effort we're making, 9 times out of 10, the decision was the right one because we had the right analytics to inform the decisions we were making.
Yeah, I can piggyback on some of that. I think in terms of tooling and data quality, data hygiene is a top of mind. I think in any size business that I've worked at, this is the smallest business I've ever worked at, and we suffer from a lot of common pain points that a larger enterprise would feel when it comes to siloing data or just unclean data that feeds the wrong inputs to develop a truly well-personalized experience. So like garbage in, garbage out is what you hear very commonly. So I think investing in tooling to allow for one, high data hygiene, and then 2, that's just in form of ingest. And then when it comes to like rolling out and deployment, we, across all product verticals where we want to incorporate some level of personalization, we usually roll out gradually. I think that's pretty standard in industry, like some form of experimentation where you, you bucket what journey or what experience you want to, or that you think will provide a delightful experience, and then see how that works, and then expand from there, and then take your learnings, or you roll it back. And but yeah, instead of a lot of the tools do a lot of very similar things, and I think it's matching the art of who are you working with, what are their preferences and their workflows, and what do you think will have maximized adoption internally, so that you can then like actually effectively use those. Do all the actions that I just mentioned when it comes to like data cleanliness and all that.
I think from a data perspective, that is critical, right? You know, understanding the data you have and the data that you're going to need, you know, coming out of this is absolutely essential to building any campaign. And you know, I've seen it in the worst of cases, and I've seen it in the best of cases. And one of the recent things that we did at our bank was with a paycheck protection program, a PPP program with small businesses. We gained an awful lot of customers on the dime from a new program that just really wasn't built. And we had data at the hundreds of thousands behind it as one of the largest lenders in the country. So the right intention was help small businesses, get them out of what they need to do, and what else? What's that next thing that we could also help them with as they continue to get out of COVID and work past the pandemic? And our data didn't support our ambition. And that's a very tough thing. You know, we had great ambition of getting to the customers and saying, this is exactly what's happening from servicing out to what's next. And we couldn't do it. If you looked at the open rates that we had at first, our open rates were in the 20 to 30% on a few 100,000 people. So by all means, it's a decent average. When we put it together of starting to really understand the customer, understand what they were going through, add the empathy and tell a great story, right? Which is also a factor of using empathy in the data to understand it, but then also telling a great story. And you know, I attribute it to like Matt Damon, right? Matt Damon talks about how he's a great actor. He felt that he had hit the mark of being a great actor. But when he hit the next level beyond that, it was because he told a great story. And that became a crucial moment for him to say that it's not about being an actor, it's about telling the audience the story. So if you're not using the data behind the scenes to understand the story, then what, right? What's next? You're going to flop and you're going to have a 20% open rate. When we went back to that Disney model and started to have empathy in our story for the customers and say, this is what's next, this is what you need to do from what we see, or tell us that it's wrong. We hit the mark with a lot of test and learn, a lot of different approaches on campaigns, a lot of A/B testing to say, this worked, this didn't work. When we hit our mark, it was a 70+% open rate on a few 100,000 customers. I don't know that we'll ever get that again, and we kept that up for more than a year and a half with exactly that same method and the right time and the right moment that all marketers here are looking for. But it really was born out of data first and getting that story behind it that really, related to the audience, the relevancy of it.
I mean, this really leads well into our next question around, what sort of metrics should we be looking for as marketers, whether it's acquisition, onboarding, conversion, retention. Maybe you can share some of your most effective techniques for achieving some of those metrics that you think really could be valuable to everyone.
Deepak touched on this earlier. I think for us and for KeyBank and for the organizations that I've worked for in the past, we use a combination of NPS, CSAT, and CES. That will give you a solid sort of framework for what your benchmark is. But then from there, and this is assuming that we're actually doing customer journeys in the way that the technology is intended to use customer journeys, what we end up doing is then mapping what we've identified in our business intelligence exercise with our business analysts to make sure that we are hitting those key performance indicators that we had intended. Every single use case and associated journey will have different metrics that you need to measure by. That means before you put your hands on the keyboards, whether you're using MoEngage or another platform, you have to do some work up front. Just by a quick show of hands, in advance of for anybody that's building customer journeys, who's doing an empathy mapping exercise ahead of that? Okay. What we have to start thinking about is building the map ahead of putting your hands on keyboard. One of the key parts of that, in addition to identifying what the journey could be and what the customer segment should be, is identifying those key performance indicators for that individual journey that you can measure as you optimize. So when you're thinking about planning and organizing your journeys, and again, a journey is something that's based on a hypothetical use case. You want to not only define the segments and the journey before you put hands on keyboard, but the key performance indicators as well. And then to a certain extent, you can map those back to the benchmark that you find in a combination of NPS, CSAT, and CES. And just set groundwork there. NPS is loyalty. CSAT is the individual interaction that you have with a customer, and CES is the level of effort your customers have when interacting with your company.
I would say that when we think about metrics when developing any new product features that relate to personalization or incorporate some level of personalization, it really depends. I'll give an example. It depends on what our global goals are as a company. So, example at Misfits Market, 2 years ago, it was kind of growth at all costs, and then the last 12 to 18 months, it's kind of shifted to a more profitable, focused one. There's overlap. Those things are not mutually exclusive. You can grow while being profitable, right? But here's the example. So if anyone here is a shopper at Misfits Market, feel free to do so. When you subscribe each week, or on whatever cadence you subscribe to us for, we will auto-populate your cart based on preferences you either input or if you've shopped with us before, your historical transactions. And how we optimize our models of personalization of this particular feature, tweak and evolved to match kind of our global goals as a company. And I'll use this as an example for growth. Maybe we only really need to optimize based on what you'll likely add to cart to convert, and maybe we attribute less weight to high margin items. But then as we shift those goals, we may shift our model and attribute weight to that. So that's kind of how we incorporate and adapt what we define as successful KPIs as our company evolves. And then the second piece is as we, across the life cycle of the evolution of our company and their goals, we also incorporate or try to heavily think about countermetrics of how, if someone on the team is very focused as a product owner of this cart feature, how does investing and if they hit all their goals of people engaging with their cart more and eventually converting and checking out with it, does this impact any other part of the experience that maybe another product owner might be focused on? For example, search. If you already auto-populate your cart, maybe someone doesn't really need to search for any more items because what they have is there. And so that might impact another part of the business that might have impacts. Anyways, that's my piece.
So for us, we have two frameworks that we're using. One is around go-to-market, and that would broadly capture like acquisition and retention. And the second one is around product protections. And so that's really focused around engagement. And so those are the outcome metrics that those are the North Stars. But underneath it, we really focus a lot more around leading indicators, because to your point about the journeys are all about setting up leading indicators that tell you, are you going to eventually get to the outcome metrics? So for example, as McAfee, we're running a global business where our trial versions are embedded in 90% of the world's laptops. So it's the Dells, Lenovo's, HPs. So for them, we have 30 days to basically get them from a free trial to a paid conversion. And how do we personalize that? Really, the end outcome is conversion rates, but the leading indicators is, did I successfully get them to discover the product? Did I successfully get them to onboard and start using at least one plus feature? Did I get them to look at the different personalized offers we have? And then did they eventually convert, right? So by using that framework, you got to define those leading indicators as proxy metrics so you can look at all of them collectively and make sure that you're balancing your portfolio to hit those outcomes. We do similar things around product value as well, what kind of device engagement are we getting? What kind of feature engagement are we getting? What's my D7 metric? What's my D30? How they're doing in terms of renewals, right? 60 days before, 30 days before. And then using a lot of ML models to decide what's the churn characteristic. And then what kind of personalized offers do I want to give somebody who's higher propensity to their credit card's already telling me they've closed the account, or they've not used the product in a while. Those are all leading indicators that say, here's how we will personalize the offer to make sure we are doing a save or a retention strategy on them.
So, in getting into some of these outcomes that we're looking for, can you all talk in general, maybe just about, some of the most effective workflows or automations that you may have put in place to ultimately achieve some of those outcomes or metrics that we've shared here today?
Sure. I mean, for me, every company that I've been with has always been the same story. It's asking yourself and putting yourself in the customer's shoes. The who you are is always the first question. Who are you, and what am I looking for today? And I try to even define data like that as well, because it's easier to tell a story, like I was saying before, and have somebody else in the organization understand that story than it is to look at data, right? With data, it's pretty important to both have the story of the data and the hypothesis, but then also the answer. What are the expected outcomes that you're looking for? And I think that's always been that presentation layer. So it's exploratory versus explanatory. If you can't explain it, then you can't build it. And trying to get behind the data to understand and let other people know exactly what that customer's going through becomes then a data story from there. And the exploratory side is that presentation layer that comes off of that. How are you going to present those question marks back to the customer and be able to walk them through easily, like Ryan is saying, so that you can get to a predictive state. So you can get to modeling for, that propensity of what they're going to do next. But you got to start backwards in that journey, and that's always been the most important for me.
And what Adam just walked us through is sort of the goal state, right? to take a couple steps back, and especially with my experience with trying to leverage new MarTech stacks and transform a marketing organization, in order to get to that end state, you have to retrain your marketing organization, who traditionally in September, October, November are spending millions of dollars, depending on the size of your business, on planning for next year, right? What Adam just walked us through eliminates that. Right? So what we're talking about really is, and it's really hard for us to say, hey, these are the journeys that you guys need to be thinking about, because this is all new. Right? This is all new for all of us. And although we sound like we're experts up here, we're in the middle of making the soup as well. So what I would say is the way I think about, well, what journeys do we need to build based on the use case library that we've identified, because we have really smart business analysts, is the core journeys that you're going to build are sort of the super highway. Those are the core journeys, and there might be 10 of them, right? And it depends from business to business, that you're going to have to optimize and review over time. Where you're going to be spending a lot of time are on those journeys that surprise and delight, convert, drive individuals to certain products based on triggers of propensity and behavior, right? That's where you're going to be spending a lion's share of your time once you get your core journeys built. So what I would say is the best advice I can give: don't overthink it. Start with your 10 core journeys, and then you're off to the races.
So now I want each of you to get out your crystal balls and think about moving forward. What sort of emerging technologies do you all believe will have the most significant impact on the future of hyper-personalization engagement? And what are some of the best ways we as organizations can go about preparing for those sort of tools?
Sure, I can take a stab at it. I think two emerging technologies / areas that I feel like will fundamentally change. One is what Ravi touched upon, which is Gen AI, right? I think it's fairly obvious, but in some of the ways that we are approaching it is, for example, to like use as your personal assistant, right? Which is like one of the things we've just deployed on our website is like, help me choose the right product. And so personalization comes into play, where depending on what they're looking for, are they an individual, are they a family, are they looking for identity protection or personal protection, we kind of guide them to get to the right product. So it's hyper-personalized, but our crawl, walk, run is, can we create a rule base, deploy it, learn from it? Where we are moving to is conversational AI that's powered by large language models and Gen AI, right? So we're kind of on that journey, and I think my big bet is that we'll learn a lot that actually helps us get to those outcome metrics. The second one that I would say is really around contextualization, right? What we are seeing is the power of learning all the signals that are happening inside the app, inside the website, inside the real-time interactions. And previously, it was all about, like, let's collect all the data, put it into a data warehouse, segment it, synthesize it, then figure out the insights, and then create the right offers. All of that has gotten fast-forwarded and zipped up into like things happening in a microsecond, right? So, and that's the power of technology, powering MarTech and powering marketing, right? And to me, it's all about like, how do you take all of that information, contextualize it in like milliseconds, and give the right offer based on that user's real-time interactions. Those are two things that I believe will fundamentally change the marketing, especially like the digital marketing landscape, as it's powered more and more by technology and Gen AI.
Right there with you. Couldn't be happier that AI broke out when it did, because it's been 5, 6, 7 years of like the real biggest movement of AI, and that was when the Facebooks and Googles got involved to say, we're going to automate a car. Sooner or later, a car is going to be driving itself, and everybody went, oh, yeah, good or bad, or ugly. But they did it, and that progression was awesome. And then it kind of died down because people didn't know what to do with it. So now you have Gen AI, that's a different story. But I completely agree that the first phase coming out of Gen AI isn't that it works or the process of it, it's natural language. Yelp has been discovering this and working on this for a good 7, 8 years already. So there are companies that are well advanced, but it's tell a story like you would tell me a story, not just the way a data might expect it to say a story. in order to do that, it's exactly the same answer that you said. There's got to be a context for it. So natural language plus context is I think, the next phase of what AI still has to go through in order to become the next best thing. You know, right now, you can see the models, you can see stuff when you start to type, that it's giving you some predictive text answers, but it might not be how you speak. So training it to how you talk and have a good conversation is I think, probably the golden ticket right now.
Yeah, I would agree with all those sentiments. I think AI is like top of mind for everyone. I think an area that's lost a little bit of momentum, or not really lost momentum, but is ripe for innovation is digitizing a lot of offline like touch points that people still go to. I think that's a huge gap just in marketing in general. So for example, like events. And you see some, I'm not going to like double down on any given particular technology, but you see some investments trying to tap into that space and trying to digitize those engagements. Like a lot of those VR, AR types of technologies is one example. I'm not saying that's like the key to unlocking and digitizing these things, but I think like we talked extensively about data today. I think there's a lot of room for innovation in some shape, way, or form in basically digitizing those experiences.
All right, I'm going to be boring because they took AI away from me. I think, and this is to be serious, I think in order for this technology to work, and we talked a lot about data and data lakes, and to be clear, data lake is just a really nice way of saying my data's all over the place, right? I think an emerging technology, it's not even emerging technology, right? Amazon is on the forefront of this. Google is obviously on the forefront of this, is innovating around data supply chains. How do I get the data from a data lake, or all my crappy tables, into my CDP that I just spent a lot of money on, so I can align that data with a unique customer file, and then begin to learn that 360 view around the customer. Modern data supply chains will allow for that to happen, so that you're not spending all your time merging your individual databases, but you're creating a supply chain into your CDP, which is the engine that tells you who your customer is, and then allows you to build those segments and align them to journeys. So if you're going to Google anything, Google modern data supply chains. That's what I see moving forward.
So to wrap up, guys, I think just based on your experience, what advice would you give businesses seeking to reevaluate or improve their personalization or automation strategies?
Reorg your org. Start there. As you're implementing, you do two things at once.
Yeah, that. And also just be extremely intentional. You don't need every bell and whistle. You don't need to personalize every touch point along the journey. Well, maybe you do. It depends on the business, but my point is just be highly intentional.
I'm going to go back to being boring. It's all about the data, right? If it's not presented in a good way for everybody else to truly understand, then they're not going to understand even the teams that are behind it to work on those projects. So it's get to know the data more than you would like, you know?
I would say start with customer needs. Always goes back to the simple rule of like, ask what are they looking for? They work backwards. And then all the things around data and transformation, cross-functional teams, those to me are table stakes on how you get to those customer needs and personalize it for them.
And then I'm going to add and tell a great story every time, right?
There you go.
Do what Matt Damon does, tell a great story.
Well, I want to thank all of our panelists today. We hope you found tremendous value in this session, driving customer engagement with hyper-personalization automation. And just like to conclude with a round of applause for our panelists.